but I want to welcome you to our October community call for the Chartres Academy. I want to welcome everyone in the spirit of the sacred feminine in that holy place. I want to say that Apila, who's been with a small group of people from her dream team and Chartres pilgrims, have been in Chartres over the last several weeks and down into the caves of the Dordogne. She's flying back to Hawaii as we speak. So I want to, in her stead, as she does each and every month, to begin our program by remembering the ancestors. Remembering all those generations before us who choice by choice and event by event have built human consciousness, and upon their shoulders we sit. We are the cutting edge of everything that has gone before. So as we begin our program today, let us remember our origins. Let us remember the Great Mother. Let us remember all the courage, all the wisdom, and all the love that it took to bring all of us to now. Aho. And now I would like to introduce our good friend, Lynn Bell, who was actually with Apila in Chartres a few days ago, who will give us our star report and tell us what the planets are doing in the skies.
Yeah. It was wonderful. Before I do that, I just want to say that it was really wonderful to be at Chartres. And of course, I'm lucky I live in Paris and I can go easily. But we had a very privileged small group. And among the people who were there, for those of you who've been, Marianne came from Kenya, and Veronica came from South Africa. There was, and Gail Lloyd came, and Bob of Chartres. So we had a very heartfelt, and many others as well, and we had a very heartfelt reconnecting, and it really moved me to be there. So I just want to bring that spirit of connecting with me today. What's going on in the sky? Well, if any of you follow astrology, you'll remember that a lot of planets were retrograde, something like 6 planets retrograde. And when this happens, of course, the planets are not really moving backwards in the sky, but they are from our perspective, which is how we see the sky. And just last week, Pluto changed direction, and today, depending on where you are, Saturn changes direction. For me, it's at 4 in the morning tomorrow, and for those of you on the East Coast, it's at 2 in the morning, and on the West Coast, a very early dawn. Saturn will change direction, and this is considered important because it's almost like there's a process in which we're all held back or reflecting backwards, and the planetary energy is being released. And the most important day in October is the 18th, because both Mercury and Jupiter go direct. So we'll step out of a majority period where, which I've been calling freedom on a leash, as you know, into something where there's almost like a spring of a movement forward. Now, the other thing happening in the sky is today, actually yesterday, I was driving home from the country and saw a conjunction of Venus and Saturn in the setting sky. Probably some of you have seen it as well. And Venus is conjunct the South Node. And this means that in terms of our relationships, in terms of our connecting, we're circling back, we're being reminded of connections. We're being reminded of things we've known in the past. I happened to be, I was actually at a funeral, but I connected to people who I hadn't seen in some time. And there was this very strong heart opening, as there are as an event, as there is at an event like that. And a very strong reminder of the way everyone is touched and linked together, and what happens when we lose those connections, or when those connections simply are brought back. And I've had a lot of news of people circling back this way who I haven't seen in a long time. So Apila, for one, it was really wonderful to see her after all this time, because even though we see each other on Zoom and we've stayed very linked, the personal connection has something of incredible warmth, and I hope we'll all have that next summer. The other thing is that this new moon was exactly conjunct Mars. And Mars has to do with our courage to step forward into life. It has to do with it can also have to do with the need to defend ourselves, or the feeling that we're in a challenge or a war of some kind. So there's a couple of ways to look at that. One is that we're moving forward. All the indicators are that we're moving forward over the next week, that there is we're no longer held back, where there's a release of energy. But when Mars is very strong, it can also indicate the possibility of danger, or too much force, too much aggression, you could say. So because this new moon was exactly conjunct Mars in Libra, a sign that is very much connected to other people, it really has to do with our awareness of how we affect others, our awareness of how we participate in the conversation, how we welcome, how we dance, how we offer our best self. And I was also reading Apila's book because I was able to have my copy because she was here. And I was thinking about, I learned that she had spent time in Alaska. I'd never known that. And one of the, she was looking at petroglyphs there. And I came across some other things about a petroglyph of a hand with a hole in it. And this hand with the hole in it is a symbol for the goddess Sedna, and Sedna is also a dwarf planet. Maybe I'll talk about her another time. But in this symbol, she allows enough of the animal spirits to come through so that human beings can be fed on Earth. But the whole is also a reminder of not to take too much. So when we have Mars conjunct Sun, which is a lot about self-affirmation, what I want, what I desire, what I want. The fact that it's in Libra allows us to look at our own desires and our own forward movement, but also how we affect others as we move forward. So there's an opening energy, there's a rushing forward, but also a reminder, how do we affect others? How do we find the hole in the hand so we don't, it's not just about what all we take or what we want, but also letting energy to move through as we move out in our own desire in the world. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Lynn, so much. Wonderful to know that you were in Chartres with Apila and the Dream Team, and consecrated all of our love and sense of connection to that place. And just so everybody knows, in our December community call, we're going to have Apila and the Dream Team and Lynn talk more about their experience there. They also went down to the caves, the Neolithic caves down in the Dordogne, so they'll have photos and a report from that journey as well.
Is that the
Today
November?
we want to
Jim, is that November or December that we'll do that?
November.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. That'll be our next month. Now, today we want to have a very special guest, Roland Mccarty, who's the Director of Research for the HeartMath Institute. Over the last several months, there's been quite a bit of discussion about heart coherence. As you all know, we do a heart coherence exercise every single day on Humanity Rising. We've been supporting the Global Coherence Pulse, which is a monthly coherence meditation worldwide. There's been discussion of the relationship between heart coherence and the earth, and between heart coherence and sun cycles. And so because of all that discussion that we've had, we thought we would bring in the person that probably knows more about this than just about anybody. So Roland, really appreciate your willingness to take time on a Sunday morning to talk to us. And I'll turn the program over to Roland now. But if you have any questions or comments, everyone, just put them in the chat. The Zoom technology is a little dicey today. So rather than promoting people to have video and audio and all that, we'll just do it through the chat. But I'll be monitoring that. And then when Roland finishes his presentation, we'll bring some of the questions and comments in. So Roland, welcome. And I turn the floor over to you.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's great to be here and an honor to talk to you all. I'm going to go ahead and switch on my PowerPoint here and share screen. All right, so Zoom's kind of slow these days, I've noticed, on sharing, but here we go. So hopefully everybody's seen my title slide. So I thought I would title this today, The Science of Global Coherence, based on what Jim had asked me to present. What it is, why it's important, and how to play your role in creating a better world. So with that said, let's just jump in here. I thought I'd just start with us in our relationship to the Earth and beyond the environment. And a saying that we use a lot here at the GCI, or the Global Coherence Initiative, is really asking people to pause and ask themselves, what am I feeding the field? As we'll see today, it's both our personal field and the global field as well. When we put electrodes across your chest, or electrodes on the head to measure the brain waves, what are literally being measured is current flow. That's why it's called the electrocardiogram if we're measuring the heart. It's measuring basically the flow of electricity. And whenever there's a flow of electrical current, this is physics 101, basic physics, that we know we produce a magnetic field. And magnetic fields have the property of radiating through things. That's why cell phones will work inside of buildings. Of course, in any transmitter, like a radio station or TV station, cell phones, etc., we're using the electromagnetic field to carry information. And it's, again, the magnetic field that goes through the walls. That's why our cell phones work indoors. Well, it's the same thing when the heart beats, or the brain's electrical activity. The magnetic fields do radiate through the skull or through the chest and radiate out into the environment around us. And just like in our cell phones, these fields are carrying information. And that's something I'll show you we can actually measure. So how do we know the magnetic field extends external to the body? Well, we can measure it and use a device called a magnetometer for that. And just to give some context here, if we're talking the energetics of the biofield of the human body, the heart field we can measure based on the sensitivity of today's magnetometers. You lose sensitivity to detect the magnetic field, or our personal field, about 3 feet from the body. A brain wave, you lose sensitivity about 1 inch away. So clearly the heart's the big player here. So again, you can think of this as our personal field environment. Now, when we use spectral analysis. This is a very similar technique that I would have used back many, many years ago when I was a communications engineer for Motorola to demodulate or decode the information being carried by the field. And quite clearly, the magnetic field of the heart is carrying information related to our emotional state. Probably much more that we don't know yet or haven't been able to prove yet, but certainly relative to our emotions. So you can see these spectral patterns are quite different when somebody's feeling appreciation. And then I say feeling because this is feeling that counts. It's not the concept of or thinking about appreciation. It's the heartfelt feeling of it, or actually feeling frustration or anger in these kind of cases where you see these patterns change. So I won't belabor this. The main idea here is that what we feel inside of us doesn't stop at the skin. We are literally broadcasting and radiating these literal frequencies out into the environment. Now, I'm leaving a lot out of what I would normally present today because of time, but when we've been doing a lot of work here in our lab in the last few years on heart-to-heart synchronization. So this is some data. This is a group of 20 people that, in this case, they were in the same room and all being monitored. And we went through a number of steps in the protocol. But one of those steps was we divided them, not physically, but into pairs in the room. So person A, you were going to use a technique called the heart lock-in and actually send and radiate or broadcast love and appreciation to person B and person B to person A and so on through the groups. And this is during that phase of the experiment, the synchronization of the heart rhythms of these participants was what you're seeing here. Kind of amazing. This kind of data just never, it just surprises me to see the level of heart-to-heart synchronization that can occur. So on the left, you see the actual time domain, the what's called heart rate variability patterns and rhythms, and on the right, the power spectrums. So you can see the frequencies are amazingly matched and synchronized. Now, this has also been done non-locally. This is actually some data from a colleague in the UK, actually, Peter Granger, who's started doing these experiments with husbands and wives. He's a couples therapist. And in this case, they're non-local. They're in different buildings on the same property, about 82 feet apart. And the degree of synchronization when they're actually feeling love and appreciation for each other, again, is amazing that you would see this level. I look at a lot of HRV, and it just doesn't look this way normally. And he's repeated this many times. Now here is a similar experiment, different couple, 5,000 miles apart. So one is in the UK and one is in the United States. And again, you see this fine-tuned degree of synchronization occurring when they felt love. Now, what's even more amazing to me, what Peter is reporting, is that this experiment tends to work even if one of the pairs of the couple that he's doing the experiments with doesn't know when the experiment's happening. It still works. So I think between these growing body of experiments, we can truly say it's love that connects us, because we see that in our own experiments when there isn't that positive emotional connection. I don't think we've ever seen synchronization occur. So it's always when there's this loving or some type of a strong positive emotional connection that we see synchronization occur, whether it's local or non-local. Okay, so kind of moving then into GCI, or the Global Coherence Initiative. I think what Jim tells me, a lot of you are probably already aware of this project. But for those of you that might not be, it's basically a science-based co-creative project. We have a lot of collaborators around the world, both on the science side and also on the people side, really bringing people together to unite in heart-focused love and intention to facilitate the global shift in consciousness, basically from the unstable and incoherent rhythms and consciousness we see today to more compassionate care, more cooperation, and leading to increasing peace. So some of the high-level, I'll call them hypotheses or perspectives we have here at GCI. The first one, that the Earth is always constantly based bathe, in these electromagnetic fields. That's not a hypothesis. This is fact. We know this from, and many studies have looked at these relationships. I mean, I've got a stack of papers about 2 feet high over there on one of my desks just on this topic. But what we're suggesting here at GCI, along with many others, is that these fields affect and connect all living organisms on the planet, of course, including us, but animals, trees, really any living system is interconnected. And I'm not suggesting this is the only way we're interconnected, but it's certainly one that I'm pretty convinced we are, and something we can test scientifically. So basically, we're all living in this common vibrational field, and we're all contributing to it. Whatever our emotions and attitudes are, our interactions with others. And one of the points I like to make here is this: we're not just connected when we all come together once a month or something and do a focused meditation or something, but we're always radiating and broadcasting into the field. So I always encourage people to think about, well, what are we doing the other 29 days of the month? Because we're always feeding the field. But the point here is that when a lot of us come together, when large numbers of people are really in a heart coherent state and really intentionally radiating love and compassion into the field, that generates a more coherent field environment. And that actually helps lift and benefit all other living systems in the field. And as enough of us do this, we can really help shift and offset the planetary-wide waves of fear and incoherence, anger, and so on that are currently in the field. So just to give a little bit of honorment to the past, the father of the field of helobiology, helo, of course, meaning sun, is Alexander Chesovsky, who was a Russian astrophysicist who got drafted into World War I. And so being an astrophysicist, he was keeping one eye on the sun and solar activity while he was, down here on Earth in the middle of a war. And it appeared to him that when there was more solar activity, more solar flares and these types of things, that people on Earth, down here on Earth, just got kind of crazy. And this intrigued him. So after the war, he did a pretty exhaustive study of human history. And it amazes me what these older generations were able to do before internets and the modern tools we have now. And I've had been fortunate enough to find some of his original work that's been translated. It's amazingly high quality what these people did back then. So he basically came up with, over his research career, what he called the index of mass human excitability. Now this next slide I'm going to show you is from his original data. This is right from his publication. So we start on the blue line on the left side on top, the top graph, in 1749, and then it wraps around in the bottom graph to 1926 when he first published his work. And what's being plotted on the blue line is a dot for every year for the number of major human events that occurred that year. So each calendar year. So these would be things like revolutions, starts of wars, major things that had planetary or global impact. The red line on the bottom is the solar activity, the solar cycle for the same time period. And the solar cycle is about a 10.5 to 11-year cycle. And when I first learned of this, actually through one of my mentors, Franz Hallberg, if you don't know that name, Dr. Hallberg is the man who coined the term circadian rhythm, who first shared this with me many years ago. And my jaw dropped. I just couldn't believe the degree of, you can just see the correlations in the data. And of course, it's a very strong statistical association as well. And this has been, continued into modern times, and many people have looked at it and confirmed this over and over again. So in modern times, 9/11, right at the peak of a cycle, Arab Spring and so on, it just keeps on with this. So there are many rhythms that have been human biological rhythms and behavioral rhythms that are strongly correlated with these solar cycles. So clearly we're being influenced by the sun. Now, one of the things Chesovsky, and remember this is 1920s, and at this time, we didn't know about X-rays or gamma rays or ultraviolet and so on. We were just right on the cusp of discovering the first hormones in the body at this time. So a lot was not known. But Chesovsky actually predicted that there was some unknown radiations from the sun that were influencing humans as well, based on his studies of physiology and people in the sun. Now, that could sound like it's out to get us, that these are kind of negative influences. However, other research a bit later, 1930s and 40s, also looked at this from a different angle. And what has also been shown across the planet, independent of culture and locations, that these same periods, these peaks in the solar cycles, are also the greatest periods of human flourishing. The more discoveries are made in science, more flourishing in the arts, also occur in these same time periods. So what we know now, because we have new understandings in measurement technology, the sun is literally putting out more energy during these peaks of the solar cycles. It's just in these other frequency bands that we can't see, like through the day-night, the photons. So what is the understanding that I would encourage you to think about here is that when the sun is outputting more energy, that energy, even the Earth is within the magnetic field of the sun, that those energies are then flow into the planetary system, into the planetary fields, and then we live within those fields. So we have more energy. So it really gets down to how self-regulated are we, how mature are we, and how we use these energies, which are unconscious for most people. Just a quick story, I was given a version of this presentation in Saudi Arabia many years ago, and in the middle of it, a guy raised his hand and stood up and said, well, can't we just lock up all the politicians during that couple-year period around the solar cycle? Which I think is not a bad idea. I mean, my point here is that if we have this increased energy and we're not well regulated and we're in a position of power, like in politics and things, we go start wars. For most of us, if we're not well regulated, it shows up in more emotional drama, that kind of unmanaged energy, which then leads to all kinds of things, increased traffic accidents and so on, which also all track that rhythm. So here at the GCI, if we're going to do research and the science of things, we have to measure stuff, right? So what we've created is what's called the Global Coherence Monitoring System to really listen in on the Earth's energetic systems and magnetic systems. I wish we didn't have to do this ourselves. It's very expensive and very time-consuming. But this is basically a globally connected, time-synchronized network of magnetometers that are specifically designed to measure the moving fields, the magnetic fields of the Earth, the vibrating fields. And there are many magnetometers around and out there, designed to measure what's called KP index, magnetic field disturbances, and so on. But they don't measure the ongoing moving or what are called time-varying fields. So we had to do this ourselves. So we currently have sites, one here in California, Central California, where I'm located in Boulder Creek, California, Northern Canada, South Africa, Lithuania, Saudi Arabia, and New Zealand. And we would have had at least another one in by now if it hadn't been for COVID. So basically, these are ultra-sensitive magnetometers. They're among the most sensitive in the world for this type of work. That are all, like I say, calibrated and time synchronized. So we have a global measuring system of the Earth's energetic or magnetic systems. This is what the site here in California looks like up on one of our mountaintops. The magnetometers themselves are underground, so we just created a compass needle in it because everybody wants to come see the site when they visit here. Most of us got to play with iron filings and glass plates and magnets back if we travel back to when you were in school in science class. The point I want to make here is, of course, when you kind of tap the plate and the iron filings all dance around and then visualize and show you the shape of the field, whatever type magnet you have. But the point here is that the iron filings line up in lines like you see here. It's not just kind of homogeneous black blob. They're actually organized along what are called field lines, magnetic field lines, or flux lines. So these magnetic field lines, one of the things they didn't teach us back then, and I didn't learn until somewhat recently, is that they act like guitar strings. You can actually pluck a magnetic field line, and it vibrates, just like any stringed instrument, like the harp we heard in the earlier part of the today. And depending, just like in a stringed instrument, a guitar, depending upon the length of the line or the string and the tension determines its note or the frequency it vibrates at. It's exactly the same for the Earth's geomagnetic field. Of course, we should all appreciate the geomagnetic field because without it, there would be no life as we know it on Earth. It's the primary shield that shields us from cosmic rays and solar wind and so on. So without it, there would be no atmosphere, no water. Earth would turn into Mars-like planet very quickly. But the magnetic field lines are very long. They extend, thousands of miles out into space. And what's plucking the magnetic field lines and causing them to vibrate, in this case, is the solar wind rushing by. So the solar wind is, the particles, high-energy particles emitted from the sun, plasmas. And the solar wind pushes in the magnetic field on the daytime side and pulls it out on the nighttime side, the stuff we all learned. But meanwhile, Earth is turning, and so is the sun. So as the solar wind is rushing by, it's plucking the strings and causing them to vibrate. And the technical term for this is called field line resonances. Now, this is what you're seeing here. This is really cool. I loved when I discovered this work. This is fairly new data. This is from 5 satellites that NASA put up specifically to study the Earth's magnetic field. These are low orbit satellites. So the little white dot you see in the center there, that's Earth. And this is not an artist thing. This is from the data from this network of satellites. So what we're actually seeing here is the Earth's magnetic field. And you can, in this kind of image, you can actually see the ringing of the field, the vibrating of the field lines. Pretty neat to actually be able to see what this looks like and how dynamic and complex the Earth's field actually is. Now, when we measure these resonant frequencies or these field line resonances down here on Earth with our global magnet monitoring system, what we see is that one of the primary frequencies, in a normal day-to-day kind of life, and not when we're in a magnetically field disturbed period, which is actually fairly rare, is a frequency of 0.1 hertz. Now, all of this whole range of field line resonances actually overlaps the same rhythms and frequencies in our body in terms of our cardiovascular rhythms and the rhythms in our autonomic nervous system and these types of functions. Well, 0.1 hertz is really stood out because it's the same frequency of the heart rhythm, human heart rhythm, when we're in a what we call heart coherent state. And Jim has let me know that most of you know what I'm talking about, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. So I thought that was pretty amazing. And so the 0.1 hertz resonance in the Earth's rhythms has actually been known for a long time and reported in the geoscience literature for a long time, but nobody really put it together with the human rhythms until we came along and started looking at this. So that's one mechanism of the rhythms in the Earth's fields, the vibrating field lines of the geomagnetic field. But there's a second, well, there's many, but a second important one that's worth, I think, talking about. And a lot of people have heard of, and there's a lot of misinformation, by the way, out there on the internet about this, are Schumann resonances. So Schumann resonances are a completely different process, and basically they're the ionosphere. If you're not familiar with that, you can think of that as a soap bubble around the planet that starts about 50 miles up from the surface of the Earth, goes out to about 100 or so miles, depending upon seasons. And this is a plasma, fourth state of matter, that's threaded by magnetic fields. And plasmas have a lot of kind of unique properties. One of those is that they act like a mirror or a reflector to magnetic fields, to lower frequency magnetic fields. And it was predicted by a German mathematician, Wilfried Schumann, that these waves should exist in this cavity between the bottom of the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth. And that's why they're named after him. They were first measured in 1959, 1960. And it turns out so it's relatively new. There's still a lot of that's not known about the Schumann resonances in some ways. The first one is 7.83 hertz, and then 14, 20. There's 8 of them, and a lot of people don't realize there's 8 of them. And but last year there was this thing that surfaced around the internet. For the first time ever, the Schumann resonances are increasing. We've measured one at 20 some high hertz, and well, no, they've always been there. And I can assure you they are exactly the same today as they were when they were first measured in 1960 and so on. But it was immediately recognized when they were even when they were first measured that 7.8 hertz is very similar or the same as one of the human brain waves, what would be called low alpha, depending upon which system you subscribe to for brain waves. But basically, it's right at that threshold between theta and alpha. But all of the Schumann resonances overlap with human brain waves. Now, this is kind of I don't know if this means anything or not, probably does, but I mentioned earlier that if we measure the magnetic fields from the human body, that we can measure the fields produced by the heart many feet away from the body and a brain wave like an inch. Well, it's about the same ratio at the scale of Earth. The field line resonances, the vibrating geomagnetic field lines, are many times more in magnitude than the Schumann resonances. Very similar ratio to the human. So it's kind of interesting that the frequencies that overlap with the heart are huge compared to the ones that overlap with our brain waves. So the Schumann resonances are actually quite small, relatively speaking, and kind of riding actually even on the field lines a lot of times. So experiments have now been done that actually show that our brain waves do synchronize with the Schumann resonances on a fairly regular interval. So I'm sure most of you listening to this are familiar with the tuning fork example, where you have 2 tuning forks tuned to the same frequency and you tap one and the other vibrates in resonance with it. In that case, of course, it's the air molecules that mediate the energy transfer between them. And that's a great example of what's called resonant coupling, which basically says that we can transfer energy and information between 2 systems that vibrate or oscillate at the same frequency. Now, it works exactly the same way with magnetic fields. You just don't need the air molecules to mediate the energy transfer. And if you think about it, wherever you are now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of vibrating magnetic fields right now in our spaces. All the cell phone calls and TVs and radio transmitters. And if we're going to, I'm old enough that I remember back when you had radios and you had to turn a knob. And what you're doing is you're changing the resonance of the receiver, literally. And once we tune it to be resonant with the frequency of interest, these invisible magnetic fields, we can instantly transfer the energy and information and amplify it. And we're, listening to the radio station or having our cell phone call or whatever the case may be. So what I'm basically saying there, we have great examples in our technology and the basic physics to understand how our hearts and brains are vibrating at the same frequencies as the Earth's primary resonant frequencies, how we can be transferring energy and information back and forth between the two. Hope that makes sense. So we've published quite a bit on this in recent years, a lot of studies that we've been doing. And this is a study that kind of changed our own paradigm. It was a small study that was conducted with subjects here in the state of California. And we had some of our participants were literally in the southern part of the state. California's a nice big long state, of course. Some in central California, some in northern. Most of these people didn't know each other. They just volunteered to participate in this study. It's not like they were sitting around meditating or something. But we recorded the heart rate variability of this group for 30 days, 24 hours a day. They had recorders that you just wore and you went about your life day and night for a month, for a 30-day period. And the original purpose was to look at the correlations between the changing solar and magnetic environment and the activity in their autonomic nervous system, which is what heart rate variability actually reflects and is a measure of. But I'm not even sure why we did it, but we time synchronized, in hindsight that is, all the HRV data, the heart rate variability data from all the participants, and just averaged it together. expecting to just see a kind of a noisy flat line. I mean, why in the world would the beat-to-beat changes in my heart rate have anything to do with somebody in Southern California, going about their day? As you can see in this graph, that is not what we found. So the kind of black and kind of, I'm not sure what color, that purpley color that is, this is two different measures of the heart rate variability. And this is far from a noisy flat line. We're actually seeing a rhythm. It's showing that the heart rhythms at this kind of what we now call slow wave heart rhythm, which is another new discovery I won't go into here, that came out of this study, it's actually synchronized. In pondering this after spending a few months trying to make this effect go away, right? Just to make sure we were not seeing some artifacts or something here, we were pretty careful. But the red line is the power or the amount of energy at the resonant frequencies across that same time period. And you can, again, here you can about see the synchronization in the data. And on the right is the spectrums of the two, and we see that's exactly the same frequency, the same spectrum of this slow wave synchronization. So this was indicating that the people were synchronized because we're synchronizing to the resonant frequencies in the Earth's field. Pretty jaw-dropping, and I showed this to a lot of my colleagues and friends and presented it at a couple conferences, and it was, getting a lot of comments like, this is the most significant data I've ever seen, and this and that. And it is really pretty amazing when you think about this, the degree of synchronization with the Earth. But again, it was a small study just in California, so we were able to get some funding and extend and expand and replicate this study on a much larger scale with groups, 20 people in each group in 5 countries. So we used the countries where we had magnetometers. And so a lot of participants, a lot of heartbeat data. We called it the International Synchronization Study. These are some of the groups. 2 groups were medical students. The Lithuanian Saudi group were medical students, and a group in New Zealand, and also the UK. So we're still working on this study, getting it published. There'll be a lot of publications that come out of this. And so now we're looking globally. And the graph on the left, the black line is the power of what we call the Schumann resonance power. It's looking across the primary Schumann frequencies, not just 7.8 hertz. And the blue line is the subjects are from around the globe that we see were highly synchronized with each other and the Schumann resonances. Again, an amazing degree of overlap. On the right side, now this is another set of frequencies. This is the field line resonances. Again, the black line is the magnitude or power of the resonant frequencies of the field line resonance. And the blue is the HRV from our global group. Again, almost unbelievable, surprising degree of synchronization. So I won't go into a lot of the details here, but you start to get the sense here that this is fairly complex, that we're synchronizing with the frequencies and rhythms of the Earth across multiple scales here of frequencies. Now, within that study, we did an exercise where we had all the participants around the globe in all these countries do what's called a heart lock-in at the same time. We time synchronized it for 15 minutes. Okay. Now, we were also able to look at the individual level of how synchronized their heart rhythms were with the rhythms of the Earth over the 24-hour period. So we did this for each day, actually. So the one on the left graph is basically, I'm not sure why the 20 is cut off, but it's 20 people here. I need to fix that. We're looking at the degree of synchronization at the individual level with the Earth. And the one on the right is the same group. This is the Lithuania group. After the day they did this 15-minute heart lock-in. An amazing difference. Now, I could sit here and go through all the groups, but I don't need to because they all look just like this. So what I'm saying, we also looked at synchronization, by the way, between the heart rhythms of the 20 subjects in each group. So just being, while doing this heart lock-in and being more, it measured the coherence, obviously, of each of the people. So there was a significant increase in personal coherence. The people were more coherent. a significant increase in the heart-to-heart synchronization among the group members, but also, again, really surprising and I think blow-away results here, that just being coherent for 15 minutes increased their synchronization with the Earth over the next 24 hours. So pretty cool. And that is, we just published that actually a few weeks ago, that part of the study. So that, and if anybody's interested in the gory details of these studies and many more, they are available on the heartmath.org website, what's called a research library. We actually have many papers there, probably 100 or more than 100, that are free to download right from our website. Okay, so just shifting gears a little bit. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the Global Consciousness Project started by Roger Nelson, Dr. Nelson at Princeton about almost 25 years ago. And which is, I think of as a giant globally distributed scientific instrument. These are random number generators that are designed to be purely random numbers. And what he's found over the last 20 years with a very high degree of significance is that when large events that have a lot of emotion in them, people are paying attention to and have an emotion about something, and it causes this global network in a correlated way to stop being as random. A type of coherence or order is somehow introduced into these devices, which are basically all based on what's called quantum tunneling to create these random numbers. My favorite study that Roger's done, Dr. Nelson, is this one, where he, over the many years later, after having many events that were predicted to affect the network, is he divided them into their level of love and compassion. So things like global peace days, Earth days, these types of things, where there's a lot of people being organized to either have prayer or meditations and things towards a positive event, a lot of love and compassion. And we see the effect that had on the network across these events. Medium is large events that create a lot of emotion, but not necessarily a lot of love and compassion. So these would be things like World Cups and Super Bowls and large sporting events and these types of things. A lot of emotion, but not necessarily love and compassion. And then low would be the response after terrorist attacks and school shootings and these types of things. And pretty neat to see that the events in love, high in love and compassion, had a significantly greater impact measured on the global field through these devices than the others. One of the, I'm honored to say that Dr. Nelson has now asked us to become the new home base for the Global Consciousness Project. And about the last year, we have a team from a lot of different kind of scientists who have interest in this. So we're developing what's called GCP2. So this will be a citizen scientist project that really anybody who's interested can help get involved in and host one of the devices. So hopefully that the new network will be ready by the end of this year, early next year. So it's a whole new envisioning of this project. One of the things that which Ubiquity and Jim have very graciously been involved in as well are the global coherence pulses, which we do on the third Saturday of every month. And this has been a really neat thing for me, having been in the running a nonprofit for many years. A lot of times organizations come together and says, "Oh, we have the same mission, we should collaborate," but it usually all falls apart when the rubber meets the road. But this is a project where that hasn't happened, and many different organizations like IONS and HeartMath and Ubiquity and many others have come together to really support an event, a monthly event, to really help shift global consciousness. And we've been monitoring the output of these of the global consciousness devices through these pulses. And this is the first one, the first global coherence pulse we did a little over a year ago, and we see a significant effect on the GCP data. And Roger just told me a couple of weeks ago that we've been monitoring every one, that we actually have a significant finding across all of the pulses. So those of you that are involved in the global coherence pulses, thank you for adding your love and compassion to the global field, and I hope you will continue to do so. Just one last thing I wanted to share with you is that we've just launched. Just took a lot longer to get off the ground than I thought it would. but we're also now launching what's called the Global Network for Monitoring Tree Potentials. So here we're quite literally measuring the electrical activity of trees, because again, our hypothesis is that all living systems are living within the energetic fields of the Earth and interconnected. So trees make a great research subject. They don't run away, and they don't mind if we put a couple of electrodes in them. So this is just what tree data looks like. This is an oak tree and a redwood tree here in our property in California. And you can see that this is over a couple of months, that trees have circadian rhythms and are quite dynamic and have a very rich electrical life. So this, again, is another citizen scientist project where if you have a favorite tree, you can get involved and hook it up. And so the data goes from your tree to a base station in your home, which connects to your local Wi-Fi, which then sends the data up to a central server and website where you can go see your data and the data from trees around the world. And this will be an completely open access platform that anybody can see and analyze and work with the data. So if anybody's interested in that, you can. The website is treerhythms.net. And feel free to go see if you would qualify to be a host if you're interested. Some of the key research questions we'll be asking from this, well, really all of these networks that are coming together. But in the trees, we really will be looking at over many events over time, some lessons learned from the global consciousness data. But do the trees respond to when a lot of us humans have a large emotional outpouring, similar to the global consciousness data? And the last one on here, it's kind of interesting, is can they help inform us of earthquakes? One of our collaborators is the grandfather, I call him, of pre-earthquake signal research. And there's surprising data, strong data to suggest why trees could do this. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but basically when rocks are under pressure in the earth like a fault zone, they literally turn into batteries. It's a new mechanism that's now understood. And those electrical currents travel up to the surface, and the networks of trees and their root systems give us a great way to measure the currents going on within the earth itself. Some preliminary data out of Japan actually suggests that trees can predict larger earthquakes up to 2 weeks before they actually occur. So basically, in closing, I would just like to share my own perspective that I truly believe we are at a point in the history of the evolution of consciousness where we're right on the cusp and are actually already in the process of making the next evolutionary leap. And one of the absolute most important things we can be doing is feeding the field, both our personal field and the global field, with more love and compassion for each other. And to do that, we have created the Global Coherence app, which actually allows us to measure global coherence. So anybody who's participating, we can actually see the coherence of the group and track that wherever you might be. So with that said, I'm going to close this, and I think I might have gone over a little bit too much time, Jim. I hope not. But again, appreciate your attention and inviting me to speak with you today.
Thank you, Roland. This has been sensational. I've been listening with rapt attention to what you're doing. It's such an extraordinary thing to really put scientific quantification on the most obvious fact in the world, and that is we're interconnected with all of it.
Yeah.
And one of the questions which you partially answered with the trees that was coming up was around whether there's been any studies of other beings like whales or dolphins or animals of any kind that show similar resonance with the larger planetary field.
Yeah, there's some. In fact, we have a pretty strong collaboration with a couple of groups at the University of Lithuania. That, in fact, our magnetometer in Lithuania is at a veterinary school out in the country, and they've been hoping to do some more like with animals like we do with humans. That hasn't happened yet, but I think that it will. But there are studies that, like looking at satellite data, that show that large animals, like cows and deers, tend to line up with the Earth's magnetic fields when they're grazing. So there's a lot of studies like that that show these types of things. And, I'll leave it at that. So obviously, it's kind of hard to measure wild animals, but so through the satellite studies was one way of doing it. But Anyway,
That's extraordinary. The cows are just out there munching the grass. They're lined up.
exactly. I mean, globally, they line up with the magnetic field of the geomagnetic field.
That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. Just as we close here, Roland, and this recording, by the way, we'll upload it probably within a couple hours, so it'll be available to all of you to listen to again on our YouTube channel. But Roland, why don't you maybe put in the chat box, or what's the URL for the Global Coherence Pulse that happens every month?
Oh, you would ask me that. I think it's globalcoherence.org. Just simply globalcoherence.org. Yeah. You should know that too, Jim. You promote it every month too.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be making a presentation in the November Pulse, so I should know.
Oh, you
that.
are,
I
yes.
apologize, I don't.
No, it's globalcoherence.org for that.
Globalcoherence.org. It's worth everyone to go on that website and link up. It's extraordinarily comforting once a month to just join with people literally all over the world that are participating in what Roland has been laying out, this understanding that we're connected with the planet, with the sun, with the solar system, as Lynn has been pointing out, and that these cosmic influences, both energetic pulses and alignments of the energies of the planets in relationship to the Earth and your natal chart, actually have a profound effect on our attitudes, our behavior, in an archetypal way, as Rick Tarnas points out. So, Roland, I want to thank you for this presentation today.
Well, can I add one thing that I didn't have
Please.
time, that I didn't put in the data because I was trying to. I went through my standard presentation, started throwing things out to try and get it into 30 minutes, and probably still didn't make it. But another study we did that is probably the longest continuous recording of HRV of a group probably ever done in history is we monitored a group over 5 months. And we were able to look at many repeating events in both solar and geomagnetic and cosmic activity. It's on the paper's on our website. Long-term study of something or other. It was published in one of the Nature journals. And what a very new, I think, paradigm is starting to emerge from our studies. And I don't want to take too much time here, but historically, the only thing researchers had to look at, because they didn't have a network like we've created, was what's called KP index, which is a measure of magnetic field disturbance. Okay, that's what most of the magnetometers, all they can look at is the ripple on the DC and how disturbed is it when we get hit with a solar flare. So there are many, many studies who've looked at when KP index goes up, hospital admissions go up for about everything, especially depression, anxiety, mental, emotional. So it's given, I think, a false impression, all these studies that looked at it, because usually when you're looking at hospital admission data, it's older people who already have a comorbidity. So that energy comes in, it kind of tips the scales and so on. So it's like this is bad for us, right? And magnetic field disturbance is. I think that is true. But what about most of the days we're not living in a magnetically field that's disturbed? So our studies, we've been looking at normal, healthier people in normal times. And what we're seeing, like in that study I just mentioned over 5 months, is that we have very positive responses to when we're living in a coherent magnetic field environment. Our HRVs actually increased. People sleep better, report more cognitive capabilities, mental clarity, these things. And also in response to cosmic rays was one of the biggest influences. So I think especially in this audience, there's probably a lot of teachings and understanding that influences outside of our galaxy could be helping, I think I can say this here, help being one of the motivators or influences to help increase consciousness. So our data is actually suggesting that's true, or it could very well be true. But also, the sun also radiates a 2.8 gigahertz radio wave called the F107. It's called solar radio flux. A lot of people don't know about that as well. That's one of the things that rides right along with the solar cycle. Well, we also have a very positive response to when that's increasing. And with the resonant frequencies of the Earth. So a whole new kind of paradigm, I think, has emerged here that it's a very good thing to be in sync with the Earth, that it's an actual energy source on these different frequency bands or levels that we can then utilize. So anyway, I just wanted to, that's all published as well. So.
And bringing our hearts into coherence is the key, right?
Well, certainly one of them. I would say yes, and especially our day to day. I really believe that. Yeah, absolutely. We, as I just showed, just being coherent for 15 minutes increased our synchronization over 24 hours. But from my perspective, Jim, it's really how we're navigating day to day life. Are we really, and being more constant or consistently aware of what we're feeding the field? Are we being kinder, more compassionate, more loving, appreciative people? Really kind of heart-based living. Because one of the, I can't say this with total certainty yet, but certainly from across the studies we've done, one of the things that I think is fairly clear, but more research has to be done, that gets us out of sync with the Earth and probably with each other and within our own systems is stress, right? It is the feelings of impatience and frustration, which is really what stress is, right? And separation from our own higher self and others, our own larger self and others around us. So anyway, I'm rambling on. I better.
No. This is fascinating material, Roland, because it's every way you look at us, we're being influenced, and the key for us in the midst of everything that's happening is to be mindful of living compassionately.
Yeah. How about heartful
on a daily basis?
Yes.
Of our own heart coherence.
Yeah, I think we will be transitioning from mindful to heartful, right? And
yes. And the bottom line on heart coherence, isn't it just simply to attune ourselves with our heart center, listen to our heartbeat if we can, in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving? That's essentially the essence of reaching heart coherence, right?
Well, yes, it sort of is. That when we're more appreciative, right, kinder, that does naturally take us into a more coherent physiological rhythm. And so, but it's much deeper. So there's a lot of benefits of being coherent. I mean, 400 independent studies have now shown all kinds of things: better health, lowered blood pressure, better hormonal balance, et cetera, et cetera. But the big game here, to me, of getting more coherent is that it actually aligns our own inner receiver to align us with the intuitive guidance of our deeper heart. So we're really connecting with who we really are. You know, whether you want to call it your higher self, your spirit, soul. Here at HeartMath, we just call it our larger self to, take any religious kind of connotations out, because I mean this quite literally. That we have, I'm suggesting we have the physical heart, but there's also the energetic heart, which is a very real thing. I'm not talking metaphor here. That it operates at the energetic level. That is the bridge or the transition, the transceiver, if you will, between our larger self and, our humanness. And that getting coherent is really tuning just like tuning our inner radio dial, right, to be resonant with our larger self, and downloading our own inner guidance signal. And then doing that throughout day-to-day life is really when this becomes transformational in my experience and what I see with others. Hope that made sense.
Beautiful. No, it makes eminent sense. It's probably the most commonsensical thing on the planet right now with all the false news and craziness going on. We've got to come back to, and deeper than mindfulness. I think you're making a very profound point. Deeper than mindfulness is heartfulness at this particular moment in history. So Roland, thank you so much for this. And everyone will meet again in a month's time. But let's just close out with just a moment of heart coherence. Let us honor Roland by just taking a minute in silence, just to attune ourselves with our hearts and feel, if you can, in the imaginal realm, if nowhere else, our connectedness with the pulsations of this planet and the rhythms of the sun, just for a minute. Thank you, everyone. Roland, thank you so much. This has been very profound.
My pleasure.
Look forward to having you back. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day.